I found a hidden human auction house on the dark WebEx. This isn't something that happened recently, but it's something that I have not stopped thinking about since it happened to me. I didn't report it or go to the police, because obviously, I did not have any evidence, and it was unlikely they were going to take me seriously anyway. Even if they did take me seriously, the chances that I would get into shit were way too high for me to take the risk. Yeah, hey officer, not to be weird or anything, but here, take a look at my computer that has access to illegal material and websites on the internet. Oh, but it totally isn't anything to do with me. I'm just trying to be a stand-up citizen and report it to you so you can take it down. What's that, Mr. Officer? There's all you can do about it and I'm going to jail? Yeah, that shit, dude. No, I won't be providing any links for you 4chan plebs or anything of the sort. It's probably moved by now or been shut down or something. Places like that don't stick around for long and bounce around a lot to make them much harder to track down. In before stop LARPing, didn't read anything you typed, you're gay, blah blah blah. Was a couple of years ago now, while I was studying in university. I think it was my final year in total. Nothing very interesting. I was trying really hard to get a degree in software engineering and very almost failing miserably. When I tell you I was barely skating by, I fucking mean it. Got my shit together and passed in the end after this incident, but for a long time, it didn't look likely that I'd ever make anything of myself. Ended up with a very severe internet addiction and was mindlessly browsing for like 12 plus hours a day just so I didn't have to think about all of the work that I was putting off. No job or GF or anything like that, so there was literally nothing to stop me. I would wake up, open up 4chan, Twitter, Reddit, literally anything at all, and scroll and scroll and scroll until I had to take a short break to order some food, because I was obviously too lazy to get up and make anything for myself, or if I had to go to the bathroom. I was starting to exhaust my options for things to do on the internet, which is right around the time I got introduced to the deep web and the Tor browser by a buddy of mine from university. It was on one of the rare occasions I had actually gone into class for a lecture, and I was having a mundane conversation with him when I mentioned that nothing on the internet was exciting anymore, and that I was becoming numb to a lot of it. He mentioned it to me briefly, and I asked him to explain more of it to me. He just told me that there was this browser thing that could access more of the internet than I could with Chrome or Firefox. He told me that something like 90% of the internet can't be accessed by a regular browser, and that you have to use the Tor browser to access all of the good stuff. I'm pretty sure the 90% part was him talking out of his ass, but it did a good job of grabbing my attention. He told me that you could find anything you ever wanted on there, like easy access to pirated games, stolen logins for accounts for cheap like Netflix or Spotify, and a million more things that would take all day to tell me about. He told me that he would come around to mine after class and help me set it up and give me some pointers on where to explore first. I was excited. He comes around the evening and starts helping me set it up. Tells me I'll need a VPN and some other various security measures so that no one can monitor me or track me or whatever, and that it was paramount to my safety. I thought it was a little extreme, as I didn't even use a VPN for torrenting and other things, and it had never been a problem. Whatever though, as long as I can stop being bored soon. He gave me some starter links to piracy websites, and also some websites where I could buy some decent weed for cheap. But he told me to only use the seller that he linked, as he was trusted, and that the others could get me into trouble. Just to preface, I'm not a moron or a beginner on the internet, and know how to handle myself properly. He was just trying to be extra sure and careful, and I understood that enough to not take offense or tell him to fuck off. He left me alone after that, and off I went. I very quickly became a pro, and stumbled across all sorts of links. There are social networks of sorts on the deep web, just not as optimized or as active as the ones on the ClearNet like Facebook. Managed to make a few decent friends through these networks, as well as some old shitty forums that a hardcore, small group of people still used and maintained religiously. Made friends with them for shared interests like niche anime, shut up, Yes, I like anime, and TV shows, and video games. These people are how I managed to find a lot of the links I visited on both the deep web and eventually, once I was more confident and felt like nothing bad could ever happen to me, the dark web. Not the cliche, oh my god, I got my IP tracked on the dark web, and some guy hacked my webcam, and took pictures of my willy, and then said he'd come to my house and chop it off. It was usually stuff like really fucked up gore and the like. The kind of gore that very quickly gets wiped away from the clearnet, or buried pretty deep at the very least. I'm talking filmed murders, brutal fights that go way too far, or shootouts and torture. Like, real torture. Yes, I'm a fucked up individual, but I was young, and dumb, and bored. I ended up visiting a lot of banned websites and seeing a lot of twisted things that I probably never should have seen, and desensitized me to the point that I ended up in the situation I'm going to tell you about. Satisfying my morbid curiosity took me down a deep, dark path. This ended up happening to me really late on a Saturday. I think it was around maybe 5 AM or so. I ended up staying awake all night, as I had an assignment that was due at around 12 o'clock at midday on Saturday, and of course, I had not written anything at all at that point. I loaded up on coffee and energy drinks, and I typed like my life depended on it. It was some dumbass set of questions for like problem solving, and I had to complete them and solve them while showing how and why and blah blah blah. There was some preliminary reading I was supposed to do as well, but I skipped out on that. I think I had 2 papers worth due, and it was worth a good percentage of my grade, so I didn't want to fuck it up. At around 5 AM, I decided that it's time for me to take a not well-earned break and do some browsing and fucking around. I had been fucking around on the deep web and stuff for around 8 months or so now, and was feeling pretty unstoppable. I decided I was going to log onto the forums and fuck around, and maybe send a couple of messages to some friends to see if they had anything new or interesting for me to take a look at. Sometimes they'd send me some fucked up shit, like some porn of a guy sticking a jar up his ass. Fun fact, a lot of fucked up videos like that originated from shock sites on the deep web, and then made their way onto the clear web afterwards as kind of a joke. 100% no bullshit, but this was obviously before I started browsing there. Sometimes though, they'd send me some schizo expose website that they'd found, with some guy peddling crazy theories that he'd come up with, presumably while high or whatever, about how so-and-so person is an alien from planet Buttcrack, and this world leader is a pawn, and actually hiding aliens underground, and is breeding them with humans. Those were always the most entertaining reads. Some of the shit they would come up with, I would never have thought of in a million years. I log on and chat for a bit, but no one seems to really be awake, and everything is dead. I spend the next hour or so looking through some shady movie site, and possibly looking for a game to pirate. I still had the page open for the forums, and I received a notification. This forum allowed anyone to sign up, as long as they had a link to the site. This forum also had a private messaging feature, so that you could continue your conversations about weird anime or movies or whatever in private, if you didn't want to share with everyone on the forum. Pretty useful stuff, and I used it to talk to a lot of the friends I had made. Anyway, I had received a message from a user I was not familiar with. I don't recall them ever posting anything, or joining in on discussions, so I assume they must just be a lurker. The message they sent me was really fucking weird, and immediately set off alarm bells in my head. It was in some weird flashing text, like you would see on those old pop-up ads on like porn sites and stuff, that advertised very dodgy links that would get your computer an easy virus. It was in green and red in Comic Sans or some font like that, and said something along the lines of, hosting a one-time auction, first come, first served. Items are limited and one of a kind. 100% guaranteed authenticity that you do not want to miss out on. Funnily enough, I had been on auctions on the deep web before and found some really cool stuff. Sometimes it would be mundane, everyday items that people were trying to flip that were likely stolen, like bicycles. Sometimes there would be some really rare finds like vintage Magic the Gathering cards or Pokemon games, and video game consoles and the like. illegal shit like fireworks of all kinds, and decked out handguns. Even saw one that had diamonds encrusted on the handle at one point, which was cool, but it was never anything I was actually interested in. There would be different strains of weed that I was interested in, but I didn't want to risk potentially being caught and kicked off of my course, or worse, arrested, and having my life chances completely screwed up. I was on campus too, which didn't help, and sending it back to my parents' house was definitely a no-no. Other kinds of drugs, some I hadn't heard of before, listed on there too, but again, nothing I was interested in. I'd never actually bought anything from them, because I was still a little scared of it at the time, but taking a look at what they had could not hurt. I would bid on items, just to feel that rush of adrenaline that I was doing something bad, but I would always bid low amounts, so I knew that I was never really going to win. What can I say? I was a dumb college kid, looking for any hit of dopamine I could find from my fried brain. I said fuck it, and clicked the link. I had all of my safety precautions in place, and my assignment was backed up, so I wasn't really too worried about some shitty virus. The computer wasn't that great anyway, so losing it would not have been too big of a deal. It was incredibly disappointing at first, if I'm honest. Just more firearms and drugs that I could find absolutely anywhere else on the dark web, on any marketplace. Just your average catalog of illegal shit. As I kept looking through the site though and went in further, my opinion changed. The more I looked, the more fucked up and extreme the items on offer became. There were categories on the sidebar, but you could scroll down to navigate through each. At the top of the page, they listed small firearms, some stolen, some with the serial number removed. After that it moved to high-caliber sniper rifles and heavy machine guns, and then to guns that were outlawed in the USA. After that we got crazy shit like chemical weapons, like mustard gas and tear gas, and even shit like white phosphorus. They were selling explosives like dynamite and C4, and even an RPG. They'd all have taglines to try and entice people to buy them that sounded so strange and dystopian, telling you about how you could level a small village, or finally get revenge on that neighbor you hated. For things like the C4, it was like a fun way to get back at a cheating ex, or something even more ridiculous like, you'll blow her pussy off. I mean, shit, yeah, I guess you fucking would. Then, of course, you had the Colombian imported cocaine and drugs like that, but then they started listing drugs that I don't think actually exist, or if they do, then they are new and experimental. Most likely concoctions that people have created in underground labs and shit to try and fry your brain and dopamine receptors with as little product as possible. They had pictures displaying weird substances of varying colors, usually tinted in an orange hue or sometimes a really sludgy pitch black. The texture was terrifying and looked like some alien goo, or like a kid had gone a bit too wild with some silly putty. Some were in test tubes, some were like fucking bricks, and others were broken down into snortable crystals and just had made up words or a series of symbols and letters combined to make a name for them. Most of the explanations for these drugs had absolutely zero scientific terms used for them, and were either pure marketing drivel like, try this now, one hit and you will be in the clouds and coming for days, or they would spew technobabble onto the page in a hope to entice you, talking about how the fucking quantum crystals capable of inducing a semi-aphrodisiac state while amplifying your body's natural receptors and opening your body up to the beauty of nature and blah blah blah. I don't really remember properly. Some of it sounded like they had been taking the drugs themselves and weren't in any state to be typing out an ad for an auction. I scrolled down further and further past the other junk until I reached a category for hitman services. It wasn't even just your typical hitman for hire services either. There were a select few individuals advertising their services, but they also offered educational videos, whatever that means. Not only that, but the means to carry out your own assassination too. Poisons of all kinds, other substances which were said to kill instantly and be undetectable. Selling stuff like ricin and saying that no one would ever know that it was used or suspect that anything was wrong and it would look like a death from natural causes or whatever. There were numbers you could call to have someone do the job for you, and use whatever killing method you preferred for a high price. Depending on who you hired, they might offer special services like torture, or getting you a memento to help relive the moment like a tooth or an eyeball or an ear. And then things took a turn for the worse and made me feel sick. I scrolled down and saw humans listed for sale on open bids. Adults, women, children, you name it, and they were there. Some were kids who were very obviously disabled and were clueless as to what was happening. Some were women who looked malnourished and like they had been trafficked from a much worse off country and were being beaten badly. Some were old men who couldn't put up a fight anymore and looked frail and sickly. Just a big list underneath their horrifying pictures. Names, heights, weights, ethnicity, age, allergies, defects, if they had any talents. They'd even list things like hobbies and what they were weak to, or if they had any fears. Obviously people they had been either observing for a long time, or had owned for a long time. I'd heard about fucked up shit on the dark web before, and I'd heard of the infamous Red Room bullshit people always talked about, and I knew they were just fake stories to entertain people. I obviously knew that people were getting trafficked every single day, but they were pretty much advertising it out in the open. This wasn't some undercover underworld operation that they were running in some far off country. Some of these people, some of these children were fucking American. Some of them were from just a few states over from me. American children raised in dungeons and beaten, and now they were being sold openly on the internet in front of me. And I got a fucking invite. The biographies went on, talking about all of the features that they had, which made me sick. Telling you about all of the things that you could do to them, even going so far as to say how a few of them tasted. What the actual fuck? Knowing that this was all happening, and what these buyers were going to use these people for, made me sick. I must have spent the next few hours in a frenzy, trying desperately to mess up the bids on the people so that nobody could win them, and maybe buy them a little more time. But I discovered very quickly that it was not going to work. Once you started bidding over a few $100s, the website was demanding an account be created with guarantees that the money could be paid. I then tried to start taking screenshots of all of the listings and everything that I could see, but the website had some code that disabled it innately, and once the webpage detected me trying to do it a couple of times, I got my connection to the site terminated before I could pull out my phone and take manual photos. I got another message from the person who sent me a link after that. It wasn't even a threat, but it still sent a fucking chill right down my spine. Same font, same flashing colors like a Ferris wheel, and it just read, "We thought you were cool." That was that. Never heard from them again, and their account was deleted shortly afterwards. I woke up in a sweat the next morning, still in my chair, and almost missed my assignment deadline. I tried asking my friends on the forum if they knew the person, or if they could find out any details about where the account originated from, or who they were, but they had nothing for me at all. No way to track them, or find out any details. I still use that same forum to this day, and I am still in contact with a lot of the same people, and this is the only fucked up thing I've ever had happen to me. I had crippling anxiety and an existential crisis for a long time after that, but nothing else ever came of it. Told my friend who introduced me about it, and it freaked him out, something proper. Thought everything on the dark web was just a harmless bit of fun, and that places like what I saw were just a dumb myth. So, yaks. That's the time I discovered something I really should not have on the dark web. Anyone else have any dark web stories, or just fucked up stories they'd want to share? Venting this out kind of helped a bit, and it would be nice to chill and read some stories that won't be half as creepy as mine. Same poster of the ranger story from earlier, and I'm sorta all-nighting because my pets are all freaking out thanks to Murica Day. Take note the following is something that was discussed as a warning within the militia group I hung around with. Be about 2010. Militia group I hung around started having weird incidents out in the desert. Lots of the incidents were cases where we would find random Americans crossing the border illegally and see them having full-blown panic attacks. Mind you, we were used to dealing with idiots that OD'd on drugs that small dealers would try smuggling in via the old baking soda and condom method. Seriously, do not try this method. Be smart and smuggle things in by embedding the narcotics into plastics and fabrics. Anyway, back on topic. Because of this, we reached out, as a right-wing militia, to one of the local anarchist groups that provided medical care for the homeless. The anarchist group was willing to help, so long as they could also make sure that we were not violating or harming people crossing the border. Fine with us. We just need someone who can deal with situations as they arise. Merry little adventure of far left and far right paramilitary people wandering around in the desert near the border commences. Adventure. The first few times patrolling with these guys was fairly uneventful. Most of the time we would find immigrants who had run out of water or food, and the anarchist group would help us load them up so they could be taken to nearby hostels / anarchist commune houses. It was part of the agreement that drug mules would be handed over, but Juan busting his ass at the local pistachio farm was the anarchist territory. The agreement had hiccups, obviously, but it worked out. One day, the anarchists let us take one of their guys who had worked as an EMS and specialized in dealing with narcotics. This came after finding some folks that had embraced the drug piñata method and ended up ODing because of it. EMS bro was very professional about his work and mostly joined with the anarchist group because he wanted to help the local communities that had been going through surges in meth and heroin. Because the drugs mentioned were fairly popular in terms of smuggling, he also brought some drug testing kits and some narcotics that could help counteract or at least increase the amount of time we had to rush someone to the hospital. Once again, very professional and understood what needed to be done to prevent someone from going blue and purple. The day we take this guy out on a patrol, we managed to run into a duo that had been out camping off a nearby mountain trail. One individual was in a panic about their friend having a meltdown, but this individual was also showing symptoms of what at first appeared to be an overdose on some kind of upper narcotic, e.g. meth or amphetamines. We managed to calm the person down, so our EMS friend could take a look at him, but the second person was further up the trail, raving like someone possessed. Of course, we had to go up and bring this person back down, as they for the most part were completely out of it. Guy was raving about seeing shit, and saying that the skin on his body was melting. Bro, it's the fucking desert in late spring. No shit, the sun hates all of us. We bring this guy back to EMS friend, and notice that he looks confused. Patrol leader asks, "Is everything alright?" I have no fucking idea what this guy took. His vitals are fine. No drugs are showing up on the test, and he's saying that he took nothing. EMS points his hand at the nearby drug kits. Now, please realize that on-the-spot drug tests sorta need a drug, saliva, or hair sample to test. These drug tests also happen to be DIY kits the anarchists cooked up, because of course they were. Patrol leader asks, "So, what do we do?" Let's just give him some bottled water for now and watch him. EMS looks over at the second guy and sees he's twitching really badly, and he pulls him aside and does the same as the first. Ask if the guy took or ate anything, what kind of recreational or required narcotics they may be taking. Runs vital checks, the makeshift drug test, name it, and EMS probably did it at some point. After about 10 minutes, PL asks what this one's issue was, and EMS turns around, and I'll never forget this. I have no fucking idea. Both these guys claim that they were on no medications, were not on drugs, and just went camping as bros. The only thing that came up as a possibility was that they were practicing foraging, and they had been mucking around near some cacti and bushes. Maybe they found a nest of one of those Africanized wasps. One of our guys chimed in. No marks of wounds either, EMS retorts. At this point, We're all stumped, and decide to just watch these guys, and take them back down to the trail once they are stable. We even helped pack up their tents, and brought them back down with us. After about an hour, we managed to get back to our vehicles down the trail, as well as get them back to their own beat-up SUV. And here's the kicker. Said SUV overheated. Thanks, son. So now we need to call a tow yard. But shocker, no service because mountains. Alright, Anon, me. You go with those two in the truck and go to town and get a mechanic. Patrol leader starts. You and Doc, militia friend asks. We cannot leave these guys here alone in case they go unstable again. Just get the mechanic and hurry back. Alright, and we got in the truck and drove off to the nearest town, which was about 10 miles away. We managed to come back about an hour later, but when we arrived, we found the duo inside patrol leader's SUV, curled up in balls crying. Nearby, we also see the patrol leader and the EMS at low ready with the guns that they brought. Yeah, what the fuck is going on? Militia friend asks. These guys have a mental breakdown or something? I inquired, while the second militia guy we went out with was coming up with the mechanic in his tow truck. EMS looks over at us, and I swear to God, he looked like that one drawing of the 1,000-yard stare. See pic. I don't know. You guys left, and we kept hearing shit rustling around in the bushes. Dude, it was probably lizards or something. Fuck no. Whatever the fuck is out there was watching us, yells patrol leader, who, may I just add, just flagged us with an AR-15. This guy was one of the most anal about rules of firearm safety, and he just completely threw that shit out of the window. Mechanic gets the beater SUV hooked up and asks us to bring the two campers in our own vehicle, because, you know, panic attack. We all pile the fuck in whatever respective vehicle we could get to. I, for some godforsaken reason, got in with EMS and patrol leader, who also had the campers. The two campers started calming down when we left the area, but EMS and PL were watching every bush, tree, and cacti along the road. After we managed to get the campers to the safety of a local hostel, EMS guy starts talking about something the first guy mentioned while we were chasing the second camper up the trail. He kept saying that they had heard similar shit to the rustling in the bushes all night. EMS is clearly confused with the whole situation, but while talking about this, we noticed PL was getting twitchy as well. What the fuck? Is he sick now as well? EMS looked over at the PL and clearly is stunned because it's fairly obvious that it is the same symptoms as the campers had. EMS tells him that he's probably got heat stroke or something and should take a shower, and PL does that. PL comes back after said shower and is suddenly better. EMS is once again dumbfounded. He starts deducing possibilities of what it could and couldn't be, and then in some weird moment of clarity, he looks over at PL's legs and notices that they were scratched up while coming down the trail. Looks like a minor rash around the cuts, and then he goes over and looks at the socks that PL had on. They were covered in some pollen that was purplish/blue in color. The only thing the EMS guy can make of this is that the campers, himself, and the PL managed to scratch up their legs on the trail, and some plant on the trail got them fucked up on some unknown narcotic. EMS dude warns the campers about going up the trail anymore, but he also wanted to organize some expedition to figure out what was exactly growing out there and what caused these symptoms. He asked PL if he'd be willing to lead it, and PL went hard up. All I know about the situation after this is that said EMS went up there with some of the anarchist people, and they tried to find whatever plant, pollen, fungi, or whatever caused this. We avoided that trail after the incident, and never had symptoms pop up like it again. I eventually moved cross-country about 2 years later, so never figured out if EMS man's expedition found anything. Shit spooks me sometimes and ons. So many critters, plants, and fungi can be known about, but not fully documented upon. It's spooky. I was a tower guard in a prison. The North Tower was straight up cursed in that it had holes from Indies all over it, including a hole from the ceiling from a guy taking his own life. In the early mornings, you can hear someone coming up the steps. Even though the tower is entirely secure, you can see down the hatch and have live camera feeds in the tower. You can hear someone coming up the steps. Spooky. I always wonder what is going through someone's head when something similar to this is happening. I have no idea how I would react. I was told in no uncertain terms that the tower is haunted, and I'll be hearing footsteps on my first day in that post. It was spooky the first time, but once you hear the steps happening after you thoroughly investigated the side of the tower, it becomes just another thing.